Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. Childcare here. Welcome to Lakbe's Lifestyle. Anyway, thank you guys for watching my videos and for subscribing. And if you're new here, my name is Childcare. I make lifestyle videos and I like to talk in front of the camera, not in front of people. But anyway, welcome to my channel, and please subscribe and hit the bell notification button so you get you get an alert when a new video comes up. Okay, so without further ado, let's go on to the video. So basically what I'm talking about today is the difference, or let's say, it's really the difference between a home-based daycare and a child care center. And the reason why I'm discussing this, I actually had this on my list, but I've had a couple of friends who have asked me, which one I went for, which one I'm going for at the moment, because I have a 2-year-old toddler. At 2 year, actually he's 2.5, so he's older than 2 years. He's 2.5 at the moment, and he's currently still in the toddler class, but he's going to be going into preschool very soon, closer to the 3-year mark. So I've had parents asking me, which one I decided to go for and why. So I just decided, okay, why not just have this in a video? It's very good. Let's get right into the video. Okay, so I'll start with the home daycare center. Obviously, the home daycare center is in the home, so it's usually managed by a licensed person who is able to take care of children in a home. And so it's in a home setting, and it's usually comprises of children between, as I'll say, number of children between 5 to 6, and they're of different age ranges. So you can see children of school age, they're infants, toddlers, preschool age, all together in the home. While a daycare center, so a child care center, is in a commercial building, and it's managed by licensed what they call them, they're called licensed early childhood educators. So we have them in different classes. So you have the infant class, you have the toddler class, and you have the preschool class, and it goes on and on like that. And of course, because it's licensed, if it's a child care center, it has to be licensed, and they have very strict rules they have to follow, because it's usually guided by whether state or region or government, wherever you are, it's usually guided by the rules from the government. So we usually have like a ratio of a number of students or children to a licensed early childhood educator. And if you didn't know, those early childhood educators actually go to school. They are actually very educated. So, and we also have early childhood care assistants. So I think those ones actually get their degrees or diplomas from colleges as well. I believe, I'm not sure. So so that's like the main difference. Home care is in a home-based center, and the child care is obviously in a commercial building. We also have people who will prefer to use nannies. Obviously, that's in your home, but I'm not talking about that today. Obviously, that is based on if you want someone to be in your home. So that's a completely different one. But the most common are the home care center and the child care center. Advantage of having a home care center, number one, there's more attention to your child because there are fewer children there, obviously. So I'll tell you my story very quickly. So I had to go back to work when Moyosore turned a year old, and I did some research then, but because that was my first time basically, so I didn't really have that much information. I went on the internet. People will tell you, I like home childcare because blah 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 blah. I like the childcare center because it's more structured. Like everyone has their own opinion about things. Just like I'm telling you, So I decided to go for the childcare center. My reason was because I felt like, okay, the play will be more structured, and at that point, he was really attached. Still is attached, but he was really attached, and so my own assumption was that if he's with other kids, he will be more social and eventually get to start playing with other kids and allow people carry him, because he really didn't like people carrying him even up till now. Like, I'm not even joking. Like, if he doesn't know you, it will take a while for him to warm up to you. That's just my son. So personality, right? So I took him there, and long story short, it was a terrible experience. That's just it. He was there for October, November, December. Yeah, I'll say roughly 3 months. I'll say 3 months actually. And he started falling sick, I'll say towards the end of November. And you know, if you are familiar with childcare centers, if your child is sick, so it's sick meaning if he has a temperature of 100 degrees Fahrenheit and up, you have to come and pick up your kid, and he has to stay away for 24 hours. So if every time they check his temperature, they'll give you a call, please come and pick up your kid because your kid is sick and he has to stay away from the center for 24 hours. That's like baseline rule for, I'll say, all childcare centers that are licensed, which isn't a bad thing. But so initially he was sick, and then it got to a point where I was like, okay, this boy isn't sick. He probably is just trying to warm up to this environment, because anytime you drop him there, he will just start crying. He will keep crying, like it was that bad. So I felt that they would understand because he was still very new to the whole system. So I feel like they will understand, but no, you know, once they just check his temperature. So for example, if I take my kid on a Monday and they see that he has that fever, according to them, they call me to come and, you know, pick him up. And when I get home, I check his temperature and he's fine. So I'll have to stay away from work on Monday and Tuesday. Then I take him back on Wednesday, and it's the same thing. They check his temperature and I'm like, oh, he has a fever again, please come and pick him up. So which means I will miss work on Wednesday and Thursday, then take him back on Friday. So that means I'm paying for the entire 5 days, but he's probably attending 1 day. That was like a summary of what was happening then, and I didn't like it. It was very, very inconvenient, and I just went back to work. Then I was at a new job, so I needed to be at work, right? Not because I loved the job or whatever, but I just needed to be there. That's the reason why I'm paying to have my child placed there. And I didn't have anyone to help me. My mom wasn't, she had already gone back to Nigeria then, and obviously husband is working too, you know, even though it wasn't just me, because at that point we had to, you know, split it, like, okay, I'll stay at home today, husband will stay at home the next day, you know, but it wasn't convenient for us. So, and he kept falling sick, and I felt like, because the truth is, before he turned 1, he actually never felt sick. Probably had a cold once, and that was it. So when he got to daycare, it was like, okay. And I was ready for that. I knew that was going to happen, because obviously interacting with other kids, right? So there's a very huge likelihood of you getting infected with the flu. And when in Canada, it's in the winter, everyone, you know, falls sick. That's just Canada for you. So anyway, but it was just not the greatest experience. I hated it. And someone told me about a Nigerian woman who had a home care center where we lived, and so I decided to, you know, go to her house, take a tour, and she just, you know, we talked, and I was like, okay, I'll consider this. And by the end of December, we made up our minds, okay, this is what we were gonna do, and we placed him in there, and within 2 weeks he had adjusted to the whole system, and the whole illness and coughing and everything reduced drastically. You won't even believe. And so for someone who was very, very attached, he started adjusting, started eating, you know, sleeping well, and started being more open and playing with everyone around him. So I would say at that point in my life, that was the best decision we could have made, and I don't regret it to this day. The good news now is he's actually back in a childcare center. We actually just placed him there a couple of weeks ago, and he's actually been doing pretty well there, because we moved. So we're in Milton, but we moved to Cambridge, and the drive for me was that's another story for another day. But I knew at some point I'll have to withdraw him from there and put him in the childcare center, because for me, I feel like that's a good transition from the childcare center into, you know, like school, like actual school. When he's of school age, it's a very good transition for the children, because it's kind of similar to what happens. Okay, so I think I started with saying there's more attention to the child in a home care center. Yes, there is, because there are fewer kids there, and they're of different ages. For example, in Moyo's home care center, there was one infant at some point. He's always been a toddler. Okay, so there was one infant at some point, 2 toddlers, and I think 1 kindergarten kid. So that's how many? 4. And maybe school age, those ones will come obviously after school, maybe like 1 or 2, but it wasn't even all the time. So the childcare personnel had adequate time, you know, attention, to pay more attention to him, see what he needed. If he wasn't eating, have time to tell, sit him down and feed him. Unlike in a childcare center where they'll be like, okay, they're trying to encourage them to learn to eat, which isn't a bad thing, but sometimes you have to be more patient with kids, and they might not have that type of time in a childcare center. So that is one very good advantage of being in a home care center. Of course, there are fewer germs if you're in a home care center, except if the person is extremely dirty, but the likelihood of that happening is slim, because most times what I noticed is in the home care center, the personnel usually have their kids being watched as well. So obviously they won't want their kids to fall sick. So in other words, your child would most likely not fall sick too. So there's likelihood of lesser germs there. Unlike in a childcare center where, there are different children from different homes. You don't know what everyone does in their homes. And, kids are not as cautious as adults, because, as an adult, if you shake someone and you see the person putting their hands in their nose, you can quickly go wash your hands, or you have hand sanitizer, but it's not like that for kids. So there's a more likelihood of them falling sick in a childcare center. And in a home care center, there's more free play. For kids, they like to do their own stuff, especially when that age where I think I'll say around a year and a half to 2+, where they don't really understand the concept of playing with other kids, but you see them playing, like, it's called parallel play. So you see them playing alongside other kids, but they're not playing with the other kids. So they usually like to just do their own stuff. So in a home care center, there's more free play compared to a child care center where everything is structured and they have to follow that same routine every day. And another great advantage is in a home care center, you have the opportunity of enrolling a child with the child's siblings, in the same center. So for example, if my kid is, almost 3 years old, and I have another kid who is 1, and I want to enroll, I enroll both of them at the same time in the home care center. It's very good because, the older one is already familiar with the place, so it will make the younger one more comfortable, saying that, okay, my sibling is there. So that's actually a very good advantage. The cons for the home care center, because it's usually one person in the home care center. So if she has an emergency, you'll have to find alternative care. Now, how the center I used worked is, so it's a home care center, but it's under a bigger umbrella childcare center, which comes every week to come and inspect where she puts the kids to sleep, or the food she's cooking for them, or to come and take a look at the reports, the person she reports to, basically. So she's the director of her own home, but she reports to a higher director who provides her license to practice. Yes, that's it really. So if she falls sick, for example, you can contact that director, the one who she reports to, and that director will send you to another home care center under her own company. I don't know if that makes sense. It's okay, like, that's not a terrible thing, but why I don't like that is because my kid isn't familiar with that other person. So even if it might take maybe 1 to 3 days, who knows, but I'm not comfortable with that, because that's not the person I know. The person I know is who I enrolled my kid under, right? So I don't like that, but it's not the worst thing in the world. If you don't have an alternative, well, you can go for that. Otherwise, you have to stay at home. Okay, so going to a childcare center. For a childcare center, so I'm talking about the pros, obviously. There are more teachers there. So I know for different ages, for example, I think it's in infants, it's usually 1 teacher to 5 kids. I believe that is it. And if it's in toddler, it's 1 to 8. So something like that. So there are more teachers there. And for example, in Moyo's class, I know there's 2 licensed early childhood educators, and then there's 1 assistant. So it's usually 1, and in his class, I believe there are 15 or 16. So it's 1 teacher to, more than enough kids, and they are able to monitor them as much as possible and provide the care that the kid needs. And as I said earlier, they are all registered early childhood educators, so they have licenses. So they report to a higher body in government. They have to give reports, like very detailed and structured reports. So they follow very strict rules when it comes to health and safety, of the child, of the environment, it's very, very important. They provide food for the kids as well. They provide as well in the home care center, but there are very rigid rules that they follow. There's age appropriate curriculum for each of the classes. So in the infant class, they have a curriculum that they follow, and they follow it. As I said, they're very rigid. It's very, very strict there. And in a way, it's good because depending on the type of learning curriculum they're following, the child will learn things that they wouldn't readily learn at home, because as a parent, you don't have time, especially if you're working. There are so many things you probably won't have time to teach your kids. So when it comes to structured learning, there are some things that the child will pick up, and unconsciously you just see that your child is doing some things that you didn't teach the child under a structured type of learning. So, and another thing that I forgot to add for the I'll say pro for home care and con for the child care center is price. For a home care center, it's usually less expensive. It's on the lower side. I won't say it's significantly cheaper, because childcare is not cheap in any way, shape or form. If you are doing home care, childcare or nanny, it's not cheap in any way. But the home care center is cheaper than the childcare center, and you know why, because there's less overhead costs. There are fewer kids, there's less overhead costs for a home care center, unlike a childcare center, which is in a commercial building, and there are so many rules to follow, so many things you need to have running, so there's more overhead costs. So yeah, definitely to be more expensive. And depending on the area where you live in, for example, if you're in Toronto, childcare is super expensive. So yeah, depending on where you're living, the price will also matter. But another good thing is, if you are registered with a licensed childcare center, depending on where you live, again, there is opportunity for you to get some form of subsidy. So you can always go online, check your region or the type of whatever government manages that aspect, check to see if there's any form of subsidy. I know that here in Canada or in Ontario, let me say Ontario because I don't know about other provinces, but in Ontario, depending on your region, there's access to subsidy depending on your income, if you're working or studying. So that's something that you could always look into. I know that there are a couple of, most childcare centers that are licensed usually give access usually receive subsidy from the government. So just to see, you should also go on a tour when it's time for you to, when you've made up your mind on what you want to go for. Always go on a tour before you enroll your kid in any daycare, even if it is a home based daycare or a childcare center. You should go on a tour, ask all the questions you can ask, possibly ask all the questions. Nobody's going to sue you. Ask all the questions. Ask to see, if it's a home care center, ask to see where the kids sleep. Ask to see, okay, if the child is potty trained, which washroom are they using? You want to see what type of play, if they're outside, where do they play? What are the kind of toys they're playing with? You want to see, because fine, it's licensed and there's someone, they're under someone who, regulates them, but it's still your child, and you want to feel some sort of, comfort knowing that your child is in a safe space. So you should always ask. And if you're not comfortable with your child in a particular place, please give them your notice and leave, even if it means you losing money, because at the end of the day, the health and safety of your child is very, very important. So yeah, that's the end. I hope I didn't ramble too much this time around, and I hope this video has been very useful. If you have any questions, please drop them in the comments. What I noticed from my last video was people were DMing me, talking to me, and I appreciate that. You wouldn't even believe, but you can encourage me by dropping in the comments so that there's to some extent some form of engagement, and that will obviously prompt me to make more videos like this. And of course, if you like this video, please give it a like, and if you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. And yeah, that's it. I will see you in my next video. Bye.